Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Kat Clark, and I'm a professor of biology here at Alfred University. And today I'm going to introduce to you Dan Muscovici. He's a professor of environmental studies and sustainability at Stockton University in Southern New Jersey. Dan holds a Bachelor's of Science in Natural Resource Economics from Lehigh University, an MBA with a focus on international environmental management from Villanova, a master's in environmental studies from University of Pennsylvania, and a PhD in environmental planning also from University of Pennsylvania. Dan's academic focus is on planning for sustainable outcomes that harmonize economic viability, environmental stewardship, and social equity, especially in areas that have tourism industries. Topics of particular interest for Dan include impact of cruise ships on island nations, ski mountain sustainability and adaptation to climate change, and as you'll hear today, sustainable viticulture and enology. In pursuit of this research, Dan received a Fulbright in 2019 to study the sustainable wine industry in Australia at the University of Southern Queensland. I'm especially pleased to introduce Dan to you because he was a professor of mine when I attended Stockton back in the early 2010s. I was new to environmental science, and Dan was integral to my success as a scientist and as an academic. At this point in my career, I have sat through many lectures, lots and lots of lectures, and none of them have been so memorable as the ones that I had from Dan. And I'm sure that you will find his talk on wine today just as memorable. So please welcome Dan Muscovici.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and for the invitation for having me today. I'm going to end up probably walking around a little bit and hopefully you can hear me just fine. It's exciting to be here on this beautiful day, so thank you so much. First, I'm going to ask the question, do I have any wine drinkers in the room? The rest of you maybe are beer drinkers, or I guess we're in New York, so you might be weed smokers or teetotalers. So it was a good majority, still had some wine. So hopefully it will interest you and I'll keep you engaged as best as I can. Yep, I'm Dan Muscovici. I'm at Stockton University. And so first thing I want to say to you or ask you or help you understand is, where is Stockton University? The mouse? I see. Gotcha. All right, Stockton University. We're in southern New Jersey in the Pinelands. It's a 1.1 million acre protected area. No 1.1 million acres of forest when you're in New Jersey, but yeah, we have this big protected region. Our campus is right here. We're a 2,000 acre campus in the middle of the woods, which is pretty beautiful to study environmental science, environmental studies, and sustainability. We also recently expanded our campus to have a little mini campus on the boardwalk of Atlantic City, trying to revitalize things and get back to our roots because the university actually started there. We started in 1969 with the foundation and goal of teaching people about the environment. So it's an exciting place. Not everyone's heard about it. We're a state university. Yeah, we're one of the state universities. So today, I'd like to talk to you about two papers that were published in the past about 5-6 years, and then one that I'm pretty excited about starting with now. The first one's going to be about global wine sustainable certifications. Oh, I'm just going to stop a minute. I don't know about you wine drinkers, but when I drink wine, this is my philosophy right here. The second one is going to be about consumer perspectives. So you, the consumer, what do you think? We did a survey of consumers actually all around the world to try to understand what they think about certifications, eco-certifications. And then the last one, very quickly, I'm going to kind of explain what we're doing now. We're doing multinational analysis, but I'm really going to try to focus on New York State and try to understand more about the producer side and their motivations and or unwillingness to get certified for sustainability. All right, so paper number one, global wine sustainable certification. So I was working with a gentleman from Australia, from Melbourne. In 2018, we published this paper called Comparing Wine Certifications Around the World, History, Status, and Opportunity. It's published in the Journal of Wine Research. And before I go any further, I kind of want to just take a minute to define sustainability, because it's a word that we hear all the time, but not everyone necessarily knows what it is. And I like to think of it as this notion of the triple bottom line, where we're balancing the environment, we're balancing economics, and we're balancing societal well-being. So to find sustainability, you can't just have the perfect environment and just care about people. It's that place in the middle. It's the compromise. It's the overlap. So that's how I want to define sustainability today. All right, so what I really wanted to know, given that there's all these wine certifications all around the world, my guess was that they're all probably pretty similar. So I'll tell you right now, they're not. And I was pretty disappointed. I was like, well, maybe at least I could collect the data and compare them all to each other. Also got a little disappointed in that research. So before I tell you about my disappointing research, now it was actually really fun to study all these places. I want to quickly mention this notion of old world versus, anyone ever heard that term before? Old world, new world? Yeah, and so historically, the old world was the only place where there was wine, right? It was Europe, and then Turkey and Syria over here. So that's where wine historically comes from. It's still known as the old world, even if their grapes are not as old as some of ours. The new world wine regions are all over the place, right? So if you go and buy wine now, you might be buying wine from the New York State. I'm just going to plug New York State wine right now. They're absolutely fantastic. But you might get California wines, you might get Canadian wines, Chilean wines, Argentinian wines, Australia, New Zealand are very famous. But now we're seeing wines being made in China and India as well. So they have the growing conditions, and then consumers are starting to demand this. So I kind of want to mention this because what we were trying to do was look at certifications all around the world and see if there was differences between these old world, new world wines. Old world doesn't mean that it's better. In fact, California beat France in this big competition a long time ago with respect to wines, and then that really put the new world wines on the map. All right, so the certifications that we found when we did this data analysis in 2016 were located in these regions. Some of them are old world, France, Italy, Austria, and then the majority of the other ones were all new world. And I have Long Island listed here because in 2016, the New York certification was only in Long Island. The state of New York did not have a full state or regional certification. It does now, which is actually pretty interesting, which brings me all the way back to the last project and has me up here in the Finger Lakes surveying wine producers to try to figure out what motivates them or doesn't motivate them to get certified. So we found 12 different certifications. Some were at the national level, some were at the state level, and some were local, like Long Island at that time. Interesting spots, right? Do any of you take GIS classes? Do any mapping or anything like that? All right, that's good to see. So this is just a basic GIS map of the place we were looking at. Some students got to help me work on this, and we published it in the journal. So if you ever have a professor who says, you want to help me make a map? Help them, because they're going to publish that map, and then you're going to be a published author or have your map published in there that you can put on your resume. These certifications actually have been around for a while. It all started in New Zealand in 1997. You think they would be learning from each other in some way, but not necessarily. They're all just popping up because of whatever's happening in that place at that time. New Zealand, when we think of New Zealand, we think of clean and green. I think of sheep, right? I don't know, what do you think about when you think of New Zealand? Lord of the Rings, I was waiting for it. Yeah, the Lord of the Rings are also clean and green, very natural. When I was in New Zealand, and yeah, I hiked up Mount Doom and all the other stuff. So it's just a volcano. It's not Mount Doom. It's the first national park, Tongariro National Park. So it's pretty neat. These other places, Oregon, right? When we think of clean and green in the United States, we think of Oregon. And then you start to see things like California starting a certification, Lodi. France got involved. They're more of a cooperative model, so it's unique. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. California came up with another certification in 2008 and another certification in 2010, which, a little foreshadow, it started to get complicated to track these different things because there's multiple certifications and some wineries will achieve multiple certifications. So I couldn't really make sense of what was happening. So what actually ended up happening is I was at a wine conference, a wine economics conference in South Africa, and there was a label on the bottle that said integrity and sustainability. And I'm sitting around talking to people. I'm like, what is this label? And nobody really knew, but all of the wine bottles had it. 99% of the bottles had it. And I was really surprised that everything had it. So I didn't understand why, and I'll try to come back to that in a minute. Australia, Chile, Long Island, 2012. So the New York model is based off of Long Island. So it's been around for, more than 13 years. Italy came on board in 2014 and then Austria in 2015. And so I've done some research in Chile with their wine sustainability, which has been a lot of fun. And then also most recently in Austria. I think Austria did a really good job. They were the first ones to go to all of the other places and ask them what works and doesn't work. Everyone else just sort of made theirs up by working with their growers or working with their state organization. And they took their time to develop it. I don't know if you know any Austrians, but they really think things through before they do it, and they collect all their data, and then they have a really interesting system that's very successful. So here's some of the different labels that I mentioned, right? So, sustainable wine growing. So if you go and buy a bottle of wine and it's been certified, most likely you're going to see some type of seal on it to identify that, right? They're trying to market that to you to say, we are a sustainable wine and we want you to buy that because of this. So this is the label that I saw everywhere. It's integrity and sustainability certified when I was in South Africa. And, Long Island sustainable wine growing now it's all of New York. California has a few different ones. So what we were doing was basically a data collection between all the different places. We wanted to know when were they established, what year, who started it, what's the scope, what made this start, how many people participate. I thought my claim to fame, and I'm clearly aiming very small here, was to have a collection of all the hectares, all the land that's of certified wines, the number of wineries. Does anyone know what hectares means? I'm going to just try to stop and do some teaching in the middle of all this. Like, hectares? That sounds like acres, but different. It's a unit of measurement that actually makes sense to everyone in the world, unlike the acre, right? The acre was how much one person could plow in one day. That's how we came up with that one. The hectare is an actual unit of measurement. So that one is about 2.471 acres. So if someone says hectares, don't think it's actually the same thing. It's a significantly larger piece of land. And that's what everyone talks about in the world. If you say acres, they will think you said hectares and get really confused by your number. So just kind of put that out there. How are things growing? What are their goals? What are they about their labels? I want to know about their funding, their fees, their budget, their administration, all these interesting things. Why are they doing it? What are the pillars? And I was so excited to have this comparison. And as you start to see with all my NAs on there, this is just the chart that we ended up making. A lot of the information just wasn't available. Some of them certify wineries, some of them certify vineyards, some of them certify land, and most of them don't do all of them at all. So at least we were able to, compile all the different certifications at that time and collect some data to go back there. But then we also started realizing that things started in a different way. Sometimes the industry wanted this, which was the majority. The industry said, we want to be more sustainable and we want to share this information with all of the producers. The government was a little bit involved. That government could be a little heavy-handed if they come in and tell everyone, you have to be certified. That's not necessarily going to go over very well. And then the nonprofit sector got involved as well. The way that it was managed, once the industry got involved, they ended up turning it into a nonprofit because That way, everyone could participate, and or the government. So again, not really consistent there. We found that some of them didn't even have the word sustainability in the title, even though it was a sustainability certification. I think now the word sustainability is more commonplace. We know what it is. We hear it regularly. But at the time when some of these were originated, they didn't want to scare people off as there's something wrong with the wine or something. So they would just not put the word on there. But some of them didn't even have a special label. So I didn't really understand what was happening. I just couldn't believe how different things were. And then I was really excited. I was like, well, if I'm buying a bottle of wine and it's sustainable, basically what I was trying to do was buy a bottle of wine from South Africa and they're both no, they would both be good for the environment, for the economics, and for the people. And what I'm finding as I was doing this research is that's not true. And I really wanted, now I would want a QR code on that bottle when I'm sitting around drinking it with some friends or with my wife. And then, we just start looking it up. Isn't that what you all want? Like more information? Nobody wants more information. You're just drinking wine to go to the party. I gotcha. All right. But no, I wanted more information. I thought, is this really sustainable? I'm gonna scan this and I want to look it up. And guess what? The majority of them didn't even have public results. So they're telling me they're sustainable, but they're not going to show me that information. Now I'm really starting to question what's happening. And some of it was just internal. They're going to share it internally with each other. There was 2 places that did have public results, Italy and Austria. Again, I mentioned the Austrians just being so kind of proactive and detailed, data-oriented. But they ended up giving the certification over to the government to run, both in Italy and Austria. So again, the government getting involved is probably going to lead to some public results, at least in Europe. And then the scope was different, right? We had national certification, multi-state certifications, like the one in Oregon, just state ones, and sub-state, like Long Island. We thought that, I've recently put some solar panels on my garage, and we thought that they were going to be pushing for renewable energies, for good tanks that are going to have good cooling out there to be more sustainable. And then we found that that wasn't necessarily the case, or it was indirect. Other things that were all different: who certifies it, how many things they have to do to get certified, what their goals are, where the money comes from, the budget. I asked a couple people if they could share their budget with me, and they hung up the phone. Right? I'm calling people in other parts of the world at weird times, and they're like, "But you're asking me about our budget? No way, I'm not telling you that." Okay, well, what is this top secret situation about sustainable wine? So it became really hard. And then again, as I mentioned, California had 3 different types of certifications, and some wineries, if they really wanted to be certified, if they wanted all those labels, were going to be certified by all of them. And I had no idea how to break that down. So it got a little confusing. But at the end of the day, what we really noticed was it's growing and it's here to stay, right? The New Zealand certifications were almost maxed out at 90% rates, but still increasing. Chile's was pretty new, and they were increasing, very quickly. Austria is still really really popular. Even the Long Island one was growing. So wineries were getting certified. They were interested in this. So we knew that there was something out there. The problem was there was a lack of consistency, accountability, and transparency. And that, for a consumer, equals confusion. That means you're probably not going to buy the sustainable wine, unfortunately. And so we're trying to say that maybe there could be an international certification. Maybe there could be some kind of collaboration between everyone. That was pretty much our recommendation at the end. Something that would be transparent, consistent, accountable, knowledge sharing, information, that QR code that I'm talking about, where everyone knows that a sustainable bottle of wine equals a sustainable bottle of wine. That's what you want, confidence in what you're paying, because you might be paying more for that bottle of wine. All right, so that's paper number 1. Good, keep going. I want to leave some time for questions too. Paper number 2, so when you work on peer-reviewed papers, maybe your professors talk to you about this, you submit it to this blind process, and you have these peer reviewers who are your equals in the field who know just as much about what you're working on, and they are so mean to you because their names aren't in there and you don't know who they are, and they're like, I don't like your paper because of this and this and this. Change all, why didn't you just redo the study completely? That's pretty much what they're saying. It's true. What I do now is I read, close it, and I just walk away for 2 weeks, and then I come back to it and I make bullet points and start responding to everything. But I have a strategy now because it's tough. It's tough to work on something for multiple years and someone to say that they hate your work so much secretly and not tell you who they are. But at the end of the day, what I've realized about the peer review process is sometimes the comments are really good. And one of the comments on that original paper was, that's great, collected all this information, but what do consumers think? What do you think when you go to the store? And so we're like, all right, that's a great idea. Why don't we start another project? And that's what we do. We started this research project. It ended up being called Consumer Preferences for Organic Wine, and I'll explain why we used organic as a proxy for eco-certification. But I think we can look at it from a sustainable perspective as well. Global analysis of people in place, and that was published in the Journal of Cleaner Production. I put together a pretty cool team of people from myself at Stockton. I had someone at Bordeaux Science Agro in France, from Italy, from Chile, from Australia, and from the Netherlands. So some really cool wine growing regions. The gentleman from the Netherlands was collecting data in South Africa because that's where he had worked on his PhD. So a really neat team of people. We were all going to collect data in our respective countries and try to do a multinational comparison of consumers like yourself. Is everyone behaving the same way? Or are we doing things differently? And so what we wanted to know was how important was eco-certification? We noticed the trends were increasing. So when I say eco-certification, I mean sustainable or organic or biodynamic or fair trade or natural. These are all different certifications out there. It's super confusing, right? So you have so many decisions to make when you're buying a bottle of wine. Like what might be some of your drivers? When you buy a bottle of wine, what are you deciding? Like what makes you choose? What's your final choice? Yeah, where's it coming from? Like, so where you're looking for what? If you go to the store, you're like, I really want it from France. Yeah, I want that French bottle of wine. That's a great reason. How old is it? Oh, how you're local, like the exact opposite. You're like, can I walk to that wine here? That's my new thing. Can I ride my bike to that winery? Can I bring this half bottle of wine home on my bike? That's my next question. All right, it's safe. There's bike trails. What about someone else, right? So we have region, distance. Yeah, price. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that's the reality. Like, what's your rank? You have an app or you have an average that you're looking for? What are you looking for when how much are you going to spend? Yeah. Yeah, how much? So tell me. $20. That's good. Yeah, I'm not like we figured out their unit per price a bottle per wine. I do it with some friends. We just do one barrel, and I think that comes out to like $6 or $7, and it's like homemade table. It's pretty good, but so it makes it. So then I'm like, I can't buy this bottle for $20. I can go home and drink my $6 bottle of wine. But that's So if you're getting a deal, if you're getting a $20 wine that should be $35, that's maybe what you're looking for. All right, what else? Who else is motivated when they go buy a bottle of wine? Yeah. Yeah, what kind of varietal, right? What kind of grape are you drinking? What are you after? The white wine. What kind of white wine? That's okay. He's not picky. So just the white blend. But we're here really close to the Finger Lakes. What's our famous Finger Lakes? Some famous Finger Lakes white. The dry Rieslings. Yeah, the dry Rieslings are some of the best in the world. I think you go to the other capital of dry Rieslings, other than Finger Lakes, would be Germany and Austria, and I think it measures up just as good, if not better, than that region. So we have all these different things. Is it on sale? Was it on the? I'm surprised no one said, does it have a cool label? Because I'll be honest, you go and you're like, check out these two wines are the same price and the same grape, but they have a really cool label. I'm buying that one. Do they have a good story? I don't know. There's all these different drivers. And so what is going to make eco-certification step up above all those things? because those other things seem really important. I only have $20 in my pocket. I only want a dry Riesling. I want to make sure that it's from France. Right? So how do you make eco-certification be just as important? And there's so many labels out there, it's just confusing, right? So you go there and you think, oh, that's a sustainable bottle, I'll buy that. Oh, but I know this Demeter label, biodynamic. I've heard of this fair trade. They're treating people well. This USDA organic. And so I'll come to why we picked organic in a minute, but the organic production is growing really quickly around the world. So this is thousands of hectares of organic vines that were planted in 2019. And I'll come to this NPC, TPC in a minute, but it was a 13% global growth per year in land area planted between 2005 and 2019. That's a lot. That's a pretty big trend in growth. So there's a lot of interest in this. And when we surveyed these people, we surveyed about 500 people per country. And when we put it all together, we realized that most people were confused already about these different certification, and they were most familiar with the organic certification, right? That's why I asked you, this USDA organic seal, that's the one you know the most. Why? Because when you go to the store to buy food, you also see that. You're familiar with it. You've heard about it. You understand. There's banners all over the place. Even on the farms when you drive around here, you see the organic label anywhere. So we wanted to use organic as the proxy for sustainability or for all the eco-certification because more than twice as many people were familiar with that certification. And they could pick all of them. So some of them picked more than one, but you could see people know organic. And it ended up also being statistically significant compared to some of the other ones. And you all have to take stats, I'm guessing, right? So you understand that you could do all this great research, but if at the end you got no stats, then you're just talking about stuff. So that's what we were trying to do. So we had all these hypotheses. Maybe you're going to think the same way. So I'm going to say sustainable, organic, or eco-certified. I'm going to use those interchangeably for a little while in this paper. But our first one was all people are willing to pay more for organic wines. You're all willing to pay. If you have the same bottle, I'm not saying a lot more, but you're willing to pay a little bit more. That was our hypothesis. The second one, we thought some people would have an even higher propensity, willingness to pay, WTP, more for this. And we thought younger people are very interested in the environment and impacts on people and stuff. We thought the most educated people who've read a lot about the environment, and we thought women would also, and wise, and I guess I'll come back to that in a little bit, but women are just smarter, I'm sorry. And so they know things like buying good wine is going to make for a better night. And then some people would have a lower propensity or wouldn't be willing to pay more. And we thought people who were older, maybe they've been drinking a certain type of wine their entire lives and they're going to stick with that. And then we find that people who think they're experts tend to not be open to necessarily new ideas. I'll do a little sidebar story. I don't know how much time I have for sidebars. I'm usually full of sidebars, but I know we're strict on time here. So my sidebar story is I was at this wine tasting. It was a blind wine tasting, and it was in South Africa. And my wife was there with me, and we were both invited to the tasting. And you had to pick your favorite wines, rank them 1 to 10. You're trying 10 different wines. And I was really shocked by it. Everyone there is self-proclaimed wine expert at this conference. Right? Everyone thinks they are the most knowledgeable wine person in the world. And they're all together just bragging about their knowledge. It's, academic conferences. Have anyone been at an academic conference recently? They're fun. I like it. So we all did this blind tasting, and what ended up happening was the boxed wine won. And there were wines from every country where people had traveled from, and the boxed wine won. And it was just really, really surprising. So we think we know things when we're experts, but that sometimes allows us to try new things. All right, and then we thought this new world wines, people from the new world who are buying wine would have a higher willingness to pay than people from the old world wine, because they've, again, old world think maybe they've always doing it this way. And new world wines were like, oh yeah, there's like cannabis drinks, let's try that, right? Wine in a can, yeah, give it to me. Like we're willing to try all kinds of new things. And we thought maybe people in the old world weren't. All right. So we didn't do old world, new world. We kind of changed the name of it because we call it traditional producing countries versus new producing countries. And this is where we ended up surveying with our team. It was fun. So our methods, we did a survey. We did an online Qualtrics survey of consumers, and we just basically hit them with a link, and we asked them 3 sets of questions. Tell me about how you drink wine. Tell me on your perspectives on eco-certifications and your willingness to pay for those. And then what are your demographics? Because we wanted to know what type of people actually do that. The countries I already mentioned, and we surveyed for about a year. We did a bunch of statistics to try to make this, mean something at the end or say something. Some of the researchers did a better job collecting data. Have you ever worked on a team and not everyone does all the work? That continues after college. So you got to figure out how to make that work for you as best you can. But, some people did, get close to 500. You have to throw a lot of data out when you collect data, a lot of incomplete data sets. So it's pretty interesting. And then here's just a couple of maps that show where people surveyed. And so that I could map this was when they completed the survey, it was completely anonymous. And I'm sending links through, WhatsApp and through LinkedIn and through Facebook. I'm just trying to get people a sample of convenience, right? When you talk about sampling a population, I can't sample 330 million people in the United States. It would only be wine, people over the age of 21 who drink wine. So that's what we were trying to survey. But I just kind of want to point out that the Italian survey seemed to geographically do a really good job. When you complete a survey, it usually captures your IP address, and your IP address is linked to a geolocation. So that's how we're mapping this, even though it's completely anonymous. So Italy, they did a really good job. And so what I want to say is the United States is such a big country that my data is not representative of the United States. I can't say population of. It must have been like friends of friends of friends, but not a very good job finding that. So if I'm saying this represents the US, I mean that, if I did this exact same thing and I only did Northern California, I bet I'd get some very different results. Like California is very different than New York. I know that we're like brothers and sisters with our West Coast out there, but it just wasn't geographically representative. And I think that's that's why I really like GIS, because you can see things and explain things that I was like, oh, this would definitely be a good sample. Yeah, it's a sample of convenience of the population, but it's not. It's a sample of the East Coast population. I don't know what they did in Italy. It's clearly a smaller country than the US, but very well stratified across the region. Oh, anybody want to guess what the favorite wine of people from all around the world was? Varietal. What type of wine would you buy? Like a Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay or Merlot? Any other guesses? It's a good guess. Okay. Well, I'm not going to do the long, awkward professor thing because this isn't my class, but that's what I normally do in class. So Cabernet Sauvignon, way out there. And then you had the Syrah. This is just for fun. This isn't really that much. It's just like my for fun slide. But you have the Shiraz Syrah here. Why? Because we're surveying people in Australia. But just it seems like all over. Merlot is not bad with your Merlot. But these are all different wines that you might buy when you go to the store, and you can see there's different ones maybe you haven't heard of out there. But Cabernet Sauvignon, everyone seems to really like Cabernet Sauvignon. I also really like Cabernet Sauvignon. I don't know about you. All right, move on. All right, willingness to pay. We asked people about all these different eco certifications and would they be willing to pay more and how much more they would be willing to pay. And what we found was people are willing to pay a little bit more, $1 to $5 more per bottle if it is certified in one of these certifications, which is cool. Some people are willing to pay more than that. Some people said 6 to 10, 11, 15, and some people weren't sure or wouldn't pay more. But the majority of respondents, if it's certified, are willing to pay a little bit more. I probably am also willing to pay a little bit more. I'd pay an extra, if I'm spending $12, I'd pay $13 or $14 if I know, and I've already said I don't know for sure, if I know that it's actually certified and done well. All right, so I'm going to skip right to the discussion of this, come back to my hypotheses and say, our hypothesis was that all consumers are willing to pay more for organic wines. That was mostly correct, and if it has the star there, it's statistically significant with a 95% confidence interval. I mean, I know I'm giving you statistics flashbacks right now, but hopefully then this makes sense to you a little bit because it's not that long ago that you took stats. All right, so hypothesis number 2, that certain people would have a willingness to pay. And we found that younger aged people was statistically significant. There was some correlation with education and women, but it wasn't statistically significant. And then we had the other one that we saw older age or self-declared experts would have a lower willingness to pay. And we found, again, a partial correctness with a hypothesis. There was a correlation with the older age. And then we thought that the new world would be willing to pay more than the old world, and ended up being the opposite of that. So the old world is willing to pay more for eco-certification. And then other things that we found in there were if you buy organic food, it doesn't necessarily equal buying organic wine. And other things like if you have positive views about organic, so if you feel good about certification, you are most likely to buy. So that's probably the one thing that made the most sense. So what can I say about this? Yeah, I'm not going to dig into each one, I guess, but I'm just going to go ahead and thank you, younger age people who have a willingness to pay more for eco-certification. You care about the environment, you're more knowledgeable about it. It's a generational thing, right? You see the issues of climate change, you understand, environmental conditions and conflicts that your parents and or grandparents have now given you to solve. I don't know if you're going to give it to your kids or not, but it's something that you have grown up with and you can't avoid. So why not spend an extra $1 and buy a good bottle of wine? That was just a joke. Sorry, it didn't go across very well. All right, so now New York. Here we are in New York. If you didn't know about New York wines, there's a lot of them. Look at all the wineries in the Finger Lakes. It's incredible. Right? Just drive up and down. Quickly or right around here. There's a lot of wines in New York. And as I mentioned, that Long Island certification has expanded now. In fact, at one point it disbanded in Long Island. I got really concerned. I thought something was wrong. The person who was running it wasn't responding to any of my emails or phone calls. And I realized that she had left and moved on to bigger things, and it had been taken on at the state level now. So every winery in New York can be certified as sustainable. And so, again, this is because in that paper about consumers, at the peer review process, I'm still trying to overcome my wounds from that peer review process of the second paper, but a great comment in it was, that's great that you surveyed all these consumers, but what do the producers think? So now we're just coming all the way back to producers. I'm like, that's great. I'll just keep researching wine. I thought I was done with this, but no, let's keep going. So I'm back into the Finger Lakes region, great wine region, a lot of wineries. Some are certified, some are not certified, and I want to know why. So we're actually the team shrunk a little bit. Remember I said not everyone did their work, so they're off the team. So now we're just to Australia, Austria, Chile, Italy, excuse my comma missing there, South Africa, and then the US, which I'm just going to say is New York, because I think California is going to be very different. And then we think that their willingness to get certified, the winery, is a function of, this is just hypothesis, right? So I don't know yet. This is early data collection. So it's a function of age, I'm going to call it. How old is that winery, right? So if you've been around for a long time, maybe you're really interested in getting certified. How old is the owner, right? So what do you think? Do you think people who have been in agriculture and farming making wine for a long time, or people who are just new and have bought the winery a year ago, 2 years ago, would be most interested in getting certified? The newer? Yeah, so I think the other. I think the opposite. People who farm the land care about the land, and if they've been there long enough, and I think it links to my next question. The age of the owner, they might have kids, they might have grandkids, they might have great grandkids, and they're thinking, I've been working this land and making this wine for so long. You know, some of the wineries in New York now are over 45 years old. So I mean, it doesn't seem like a long time, but that's a long time now. We're getting there. And so I think if they care about their own future generations, passing the farm and keeping it in the family, maybe they're going to care. Whereas some of the newer winery owners are just people who like sold a lot of Bitcoin and made a lot of money, and they're like, I'm buying a winery. I don't know. I'm generalizing there. So, but yeah, you're right. It could go either way. So we're just making things up. That's what a hypothesis is you're sitting around drinking a bottle of wine with people thinking, I think the opposite of you. Let's discuss it. So that's how wine research works at my house, at least. Size, the number of bottles. So again, big, are you a big company? So my hypothesis is the biggest ones might want to get certified because they're selling everywhere. And maybe the smallest ones might also want to get certified, but not that much in between. Why? Because small is beautiful, right? So if you keep something small, maybe it's already sustainable. You can keep it sustainable. There's a really good book called Small is Beautiful. Hopefully you've read it or will read it one day. And then what kind of ownership model? Is it privately owned? Is it cooperative? Is it corporate, right? We think we're expecting different things there. We think private ownership is going to have the greatest interest in sustainability versus a corporate model. I kind of mentioned this, number of kids, number of grandkids. The more kids, the more grandkids, our hypothesis is you'd be more interested in a sustainable model. Maybe your grandkids are coming up to you as you're making wine and saying, Grandma, can we be sustainable? Can we be more sustainable? Like, what can we do? Why are we putting those chemicals out there, right? So people asking those questions. And then what we really want to know, we're asking a primary reason and a secondary reason why they chose to be sustainable, or if they're choosing not to, a primary and a secondary reason why they're choosing not to be sustainable. And so we're in the early data collection phases. So if you want to do some statistics, what's kind of like the minimum number of surveys that you might need? Where are my statistics folks out there? Like, to be statistically significant? Come on, I know you just took it. 5,000? So you usually need about more than 30. So when you have more than 30, then you can start to get some stats that are going to actually be meaningful in some way. So I need to survey 30 wineries. Oh no, this is going to be a really tough year for me. I'm probably at about 15 right now. So there's not a lot of drinking when they're surveying. That's just a joke. It's just like a meeting, and you sit around and you talk to people and you get information, and then you leave and you go to another one. So yeah, we're in the data collection phase. I have no results for you right now. This is all TBD. Maybe I'll get invited back in the future and I could tell you what's happening up here in upstate New York. But that's going to be my very abrupt and quick finish. And that gives us, I think, some time for questions, right? All right. Thank you so much.
This is fun. I'll take that and
Okay. You got it.
I'm gonna have you begin.
I could speak loudly. I do. I have a very loud voice, but I was just listening to all this and considering that a lot of young people are not drinking wine anymore. Maybe because they like the beer and they like to do the weed stuff, but also it's the health implications. Do you think maybe the whole sustainability thing, can that be a strong enough marketing kind of pitch that we can actually get younger people drinking more wine?
Yeah, that is a very good question. Thank you. I think historically, one of the reasons we did this research, because every winemaker out there is wondering what millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha are going to do. They're scared that their consumers are going to disappear. Right now, you could get all these distilleries. There's all this craft beers. You can, weed is legal in a lot of places. There's all these competitions for having a good time. A lot of people are just, sober for health reasons. So there's all these different things going on. And so everyone was really scared. And so they've been changing the marketing a little bit to, cans or low alcohol or eco certification was one of the motivations out there. But I just read a study recently that's saying that it's not necessarily true that the next generation is going to be drinking less wine. They're just going to be drinking it in different ways. So, and it was refreshing to see this study. And they're saying they're not going to be, binge drinking boxes of wine. They're going to be saving it for a special occasion. They're going to be going out for someone's, for an anniversary, or, they're saving up and they're going to do it. It's not just an everyday, drink a 30 pack through the beer funnel and have a good time. It's just like, it's different. It's more thoughtful. It's more of an experience. It's more special. It's like dressing up and having a good time. So it's kind of interesting. So that answers it, and then also doesn't answer it, puts it back out there to say, I think we still have to see, but the data is not out there. I don't think people need to be alarmed about the next generation. It seems like they still like drinking, just in different ways than maybe my generation and the generation before did.
Who do you pick?
There's one right here and then one right over here.
Hi.
Hi.
So you briefly mentioned a lot of the different certifications had different requirements for their like wine companies they were certifying. What were some of the different ones you've seen, and like were there stronger requirements you saw for like certain like countries or anything like that? Like,
Yeah.
out of curiosity.
Thank you. That's a good question. So I think it's interesting when you go through some of the lists. Some of them are certifying the vineyard, and some are certifying the winery. And what was really confusing was some of the vineyard certification would ask you up to 2,000 questions about what you're doing. And so I thought the California model is really good. A lot of people have used the California model out there. But like I said, I think Austria did their homework, went to every single one, talked to their wineries and vineyards, talked to their consumers, just sat back and said, here's what we think is really comprehensive. It's also not burdensome. Like, who wants to do 2,000 questions? Who's got time for that? You're trying to run a business. You're trying to market your product. So to sit there and fill out a 2,000 questionnaire, it wasn't always working. Some of the certifications also I felt like were a pay for certification. And I'm not going to say it's greenwashing necessarily, because they were doing these things, but let's say out of those 2,000, they maybe already did 500 of them. So they could say yes to those 500, pay for this third-party certification to come in and confirm that, and then they have the seal and sticker. So it wasn't necessarily changing the behavior. I don't think I directly answer your question, but like I said, I really like what Austria is doing. California has been a model, at least for the vineyard side of it as well. But they're all so different, and it still sort of upsets me. I think Chile's also been doing a really good job because they have such a high return. Oh, I never told you why South Africa has a 99% sustainable and integrity seal. If you want to sell your wine outside of South Africa, and almost every winery in South Africa needs to do that to stay in business, you must get certified. So that's why every single bottle of South African wine that you will see at the store will have a sustainability integrity seal. It is a requirement by the country if you want to export your product. So just kind of interesting how the rules change everywhere you go. Thanks.
Yeah, my question goes to like the first question about changing consumers, but more specifically about how changing data about health in wine impacts the wine industry. Because I know that there's new data saying that it used to say like drinking a bottle or drinking a glass of wine was good for your heart. Now it says that evidence is less clear, and actually drinking in general is, the more you do it, even just a little alcohol is bad for your system. But that's sort of the changing data effects. Like, I know my dad used to drink like a glass of wine with dinner, and has cut down to maybe one glass of wine a week instead of like every day, because of the changing science. And also as a consumer who would care about something like this. So what's the link there?
That is a very good question. I think lots of doctors were paid by the alcohol industry to go out there originally and say that how healthy everything was. This is I think it's a really interesting topic that I feel like with a glass of wine, we could really get to the root of all this. Think about all the choices that you make every day and the health impacts that you're having. I live on a state road, and if I'm breathing in just cars driving by that are idling there, is that less healthy for me than having one glass of wine? Yeah, I think we make choices all the time. This is about choices for yourself, right? And so are we going to live a pure holistic lifestyle? I don't think so. You're buying groceries from the store, and even organic groceries in the United States use chemicals, right? They're just certified by the USDA. The USDA, if you looked at the board of the USDA lately, most of the people on the board of the USDA are former people who worked at chemical companies like Monsanto and other companies out there. So, just because something seems better doesn't mean that it's better. So it's really just about balancing. It's moderation, right? You don't want to drink a whole bottle of wine. And I think as you get older, you do have to think about your health because your blood pressure is an issue and your cholesterol goes up and your risk of heart attack increases. I don't know. My philosophy is if you could stay healthy, if you could stay active, if you can do some hiking, do some biking, do some skiing, whatever you're doing out here, I think if you have a glass of wine, you're probably still going to be okay, just like all the other things. But you're right. It's getting so confusing. So next time I write a paper and you're the reviewer, you're going to be like, I hate your paper. But your next project should be, what about this question? That's a good one. You're like future research right here. Just when I thought I was done. Thank you. That's a good question.
All right, I have two questions. The first one is, which is your favorite Finger Lakes region wine? And the second question is, can you write it on the board so we can take notes?
Oh, okay. Let me go back to my Finger Lakes map here. Well, I'm gonna go to my I like my favorite Finger Lakes wines are the ones I could ride my bike to. I think I said that earlier. I can ride my bike to Ventosa, not the best wine in my opinion, but Muscovici isn't even on this map. Maybe it's on this map. Yeah, I could ride my bike here. So yeah, I've been up in Geneva lately, so I could ride here. Ravines is a really good one up there in Geneva. So I'm stopping at an Alfred alumni's house later this afternoon for a glass of wine and a barbecue. And so I brought some Ravines, some local stuff. I think Dr. Frank, down here is like one of the most famous, oldest. So I think finding really the old stuff. Beamer is a really good one. They're down here they're on Seneca Lake somewhere here. Herman Beamer right here is one of the oldest as well. They do some really good stuff. They're just really focused on quality. And they, I think, bought one of the wineries on this side, Standing Stone, which has one of the oldest plantings of Saperavi, which is a Georgian red grape, which is really, really neat and very unique for the Finger Lakes. Because you can't grow everything in the Finger Lakes. I don't know if you noticed this, but it's cold out there. I mean, not really today, but it gets cold. So you could grow varietals that grow in cold regions. Not that, Napa Valley, Merlot, and Cabernet. It's like hard to get that. So you got to find wines up here that like Saperavis or Cabernet Francs or dry Rieslings or like a Gewürztraminer or a Zweigelt, some Austrian variety that's like cold climate stuff. So I didn't write it all down. I'm sorry.
So it sounds like you left
You're
us
supposed to be
with,
taking notes.
yeah, you left us with a lot of homework to do.
A lot of homework.
Okay.
It's Friday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
So if anyone has any more questions, you're welcome to come down and ask.
Thank you.